She said it to my face, right after the funeral. Now that your husband is dead, grieve, pack your bags, and never come back. That was my daughter, Amelia. I had just folded the lavender tablecloth, the one Noel and I always used for birthdays, anniversaries, little holidays when it was just the three of us. It still smelled faintly like rosemary and lemon chicken. My hands were wrinkled from the dishwater, soft from olive oil. I was standing alone in the kitchen. Everyone else had gone. Amelia didn't raise her voice. She said it like it was just a fact, like reading the news. Behind her, Zach stood with his coffee mug in hand, steam curled between his fingers, like he was hoping it would hide him. He didn't really look at me. Then she added, "I packed your things. They're in the guest room. Thought it'd be easier that way." I just stared at her, not in anger, just disbelief. This was the same girl who used to braid my hair on Sunday mornings, who used to sit in my lap even when her knees were too long to fit, who used to cry if I left for work without giving her a hug. Maybe grief had changed her, or maybe it had revealed her. I walked down the hallway. The floor creaked the same way it always had, but the house didn't feel like mine anymore. The rosemary scent from dinner still hung in the air, but now it mixed with something colder, like cardboard, like plastic, like everything shifting. In the guest room, 2 suitcases were waiting, zipped up and quiet. My winter coat was draped over one. The photo of Noel and me that always sat on the mantel? Gone. I didn't ask. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at those bags. My whole life, packed into 28 inches of fabric and aluminum. That morning, I buried my husband, and by evening, I was expected to bury everything else, too. I didn't scream, I didn't ask why, I didn't give them a dramatic moment. I just went back into the kitchen, picked up a little foil-wrapped tin of banana bread. I had baked it 2 nights earlier when I couldn't sleep. Noel loved banana bread, especially the ends, said they had more flavor. I held that tin like it might fall apart, or maybe like I might. Amelia was leaning against the table, scrolling on her phone. She didn't look up. Zach finally met my eyes, just for a second. He gave a little nod. Not sorry, just confirmation. I turned toward the door, reached for my coat. "I'll call a ride," I said softly. "You don't have to drop me off." No one said a word. The porch light wasn't on. Outside, the December air sliced through my sleeves. My breath came out in small silver clouds. I looked back once, at that house. 35 years. I had raised a daughter in that house, loved a husband, cooked every meal, nursed every fever, painted every wall, grown rosemary on the windowsill. Now, there wasn't even a place at the table for me. I stepped down the walkway, past the empty flower bed where the rhododendrons used to bloom. I didn't cry, not right then, but something broke that day, and it was louder than any goodbye. If any of this feels familiar to you, if it echoes something you've lived or something you've never dared to speak out loud, I'd really love to hear from you. Just knowing we're not alone can mean more than words. You can share your story below or just a small thought. I'll be reading. And if you'd like to stay a little longer, you're always welcome here. You can subscribe so we don't lose touch. There's more I've come to understand, not all at once, but slowly, in the quiet, in the space between sips of tea and the ocean outside my window. Sometimes healing starts in the most unexpected places, in a key or a letter or banana bread still warm. Have you ever found comfort in something small like that? I didn't look back. Not even once. I got into the Uber with my suitcase and a tin of banana bread, and just like that, the house I had called home for 35 years wasn't mine anymore. The rhododendrons were gone. They used to bloom all along the front walkway, bright pink and full of life every spring. Noel loved them. He used to say they looked like nature's confetti, thrown just for us. Now all that color had been replaced by gravel, gray, sharp, practical, just like Amelia. I tried not to dwell on it, but the image stuck. My mind went back to that rainy spring in '92. That was the year Amelia had begged us to let her set up a lemonade stand. Noel came home muddy from work, holding a rhododendron in a black plastic pot. I remember him crouching beside her and saying, "This will grow alongside her," as he pressed it into the ground next to her little cardboard sign. We laughed that day, the three of us, soaking wet, barefoot, with lemon juice on our hands and dirt on our clothes. That felt like another life. Now I was standing in Lorna's guest room, trying to find a clear space for my suitcase. The room smelled like coffee and dust, filled with board games, mismatched mugs, and candles that hadn't been touched in years. She'd cleared a small corner for me, and honestly, that was more than enough. "You should stay as long as you want," she chirped, setting down a mug that didn't match anything else in the room. "Honestly, this room's happier with someone in it." I smiled, because that's what you do. "Thank you, Lorna, really." She sat on the bed and jumped right into a story about her latest dog-sitting disaster. Her voice faded into the background while I sat by the window, scrolling through old photos on my phone. There was one from Amelia's graduation, another from Noel's birthday barbecue, then one from that trip we took to Cannon Beach before his diagnosis. I stopped on a video. Noel was crouched in the garden, gently patting down the soil around a baby tomato plant. "Gotta talk to him," he said, grinning at the camera. "Makes him feel less lonely." I turned off the screen. That night, I couldn't sleep. Rain tapped on the roof like it was restless, like it wanted to be somewhere else. Around 1 in the morning, I slipped outside in my sweater and pajama pants, barefoot. The cold hit me, but I didn't care. Lorna's garden was small and overgrown, but in the corner, where the ground dipped a little, there was a patch of bare earth. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a dried lavender stem from Noel's funeral. The edges were curled, but it still smelled faintly like him. I knelt down and pressed it into the soil. "Grow something," I whispered. I didn't even know who I was talking to. Back inside, the house was quiet. My phone buzzed once. Just one email. I wasn't expecting anything, but when I read the subject line, I sat down. Joint account notice. Reactivated. I opened it. It was from the bank. A joint investment account had been reopened, but now it listed me as the sole account holder. I hadn't done anything. It just happened. I stared at the screen, not crying, not smiling, but I felt something shift. Like the ground beneath me had rearranged. Not a full quake, just the tiniest tremor. A reminder that roots run deeper than we think, and sometimes, even after everything, they still hold on. That night, I couldn't sleep. I was lying in bed, wrapped in Noel's old flannel shirt, just staring at the ceiling. The furnace kept kicking on and off with that tired, groaning sound, and my mind wouldn't stop spinning. I kept thinking about that email. Why didn't he tell me? Why now? What else had he been planning without saying a word? By morning, the clouds had cleared. It was the first sunny day in weeks. The light felt strange pouring through Lorna's living room window, hitting the beige carpet like it didn't quite belong. I had just poured myself a second cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. He was standing there holding banana bread, still warm, still wrapped in foil, like someone had taken the time to protect it from the wind. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said. His voice was calm, smooth. "I'm James Holloway. I was Noel's attorney." He had on a navy sweater and wire-framed glasses. His smile was the kind you only learn in quiet professions, the kind that says he knows more than he's letting on, but he's not going to use it against you. I just nodded and let him in. Of course, Lorna made tea, then she made stronger tea, then she offered to run to the store for cream, and I gave her a look that said it was time to give us the room. James sat across from me. The banana bread sat in the middle, like some odd peace offering. I was still holding my coffee mug when he said it. "Noel appointed me trustee 2 years ago. He wanted everything handled quietly, especially when it came to Amelia. I blinked. What? Everything? He opened a leather folder and slid it across the table. There's a trust in your name. Noel set it up before his diagnosis. It includes an investment account, a few bonds, and partial ownership of a property in Newport. Newport? My voice cracked a little. Oregon coast, he said gently, like I didn't already know. It's under a holding company, so it wouldn't show up in a typical estate review. Noel was very careful. I stared at the folder, but didn't reach for it. I thought we only had his pension, I whispered. James gave a small nod, barely there. He didn't want you to worry. Said you'd done enough of that for both of you for 35 years. I gripped the coffee mug tighter until my fingers turned white. I don't understand. Why keep it from me? He paused for a moment. He said that when the time came, you'd need something solid, something that didn't come with anyone else's permission. Then there was silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. James stood up. You don't have to decide anything today. Look through the documents when you're ready. The property's livable, and it's fully paid off. He picked up his coat, left the banana bread on the table, and walked out without waiting for a thank you. I sat there for a long time, not moving, just staring. Eventually, I reached for the folder. Inside was a photograph of a house. It had a wooden porch, blue-gray shingles, and wind coming off the ocean like something alive. Tucked behind the photo was a letter, Noel's handwriting. For when the world forgets how much you mattered. My breath caught. I didn't know if I could trust my legs to carry me across the room. But suddenly, sitting still didn't feel like an option anymore. Newport, Oregon. Just the name sat in my chest like a whisper while I drove down Highway 20. The windshield wipers kept time with my thoughts, and the clouds hung low over the coast, heavy with something that felt older than just rain. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight. Every mile felt like I was getting closer to a question I hadn't had the courage to ask in years. I started thinking about those weekends when Noel would disappear. He always said it was just a fishing trip, tapping the top of the cooler with that easy smile of his. I never questioned it. After all those years raising Amelia and working double shifts, I figured he just needed some quiet. What I didn't realize was that maybe he needed space too. Then the GPS chimed once, and there it was. The house stood with its back to the sea. Weathered shingles, faded blue shutters. It looked like it had been holding its breath, just waiting for someone to come back. It wasn't fancy, but there was a quiet kind of dignity to it. The porch creaked under my feet. I turned the key James had given me and stepped into a space that smelled like cedar, lemon oil, dust, and thyme. I set my thermos of clam chowder on the kitchen counter and started walking through the house, slowly, like I wasn't sure I was allowed to touch anything. The furniture was covered in white sheets, soft outlines of shapes I somehow recognized. In the corner, a tired bookshelf leaned a little, still holding a few old paperbacks and a small photo frame. It was Noel, standing near a pier I didn't recognize. In the attic, I found a box. It was marked with 2 letters, KW, my initials. Inside were things I thought I'd lost years ago, cookbooks, a couple of postcards, a dog-eared novel with my handwriting still in the margins. Underneath, there was a worn manila envelope, sealed. It had been tucked under a loose floorboard near the chimney. I don't know how I knew to check there. I just did. I opened it. The letter was dated March 2018, 5 years ago. The handwriting was unmistakably Noel's, though softer now, the way age changes everything. My Karen, it began. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to say this out loud. I wish I'd found the words when we were brushing our teeth side by side or watching reruns with your feet on my lap, but I was always better at building things than explaining them. He wrote about Amelia, how she'd started pulling away, how she'd roll her eyes when I wasn't looking, how he had worried, quietly, deeply, that one day I would need a way out. "This house is not exile," he wrote. "It's freedom. You deserve to have something that's yours when the rest of the world forgets what you gave." I read that line over and over. My throat ached. I looked up and saw the ocean through the window. A gull cried into the wind, and somewhere downstairs, a floorboard shifted loudly, like the house was finally letting out a breath. I stood there in the middle of the living room, the letter in one hand, dust in my hair. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I belonged somewhere again. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and something older. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was longing. I found Noel's old cast-iron skillet tucked behind a box of canning jars in the lower cabinet. The handle was smooth from use, and when I picked it up, it felt like it had been waiting for me. I mashed the bananas slowly, almost like a quiet ritual. The skin on my knuckles pulled as I stirred in brown sugar and eggs, and I realized even my body wasn't used to gentleness anymore. Sunlight slipped through the kitchen window for the first time since I'd arrived. There was still a bit of fog clinging to the edges of the glass, but the light felt honest, like the kind you don't have to earn. Grief doesn't just go away, it settles into things, into the way you grease a pan, into the way you double-check a recipe you already know by heart. It lingers in cinnamon, in the sea salt that collects quietly on the windowsill when no one's paying attention. I'd forgotten what jazz sounds like in an empty kitchen. That little vintage radio, probably one Noel picked up at a garage sale, crackled and came to life, playing something smooth and familiar. I closed my eyes for a second and let it wash over me. Noel used to say, "Music fills in the places where silence gets too loud." After the banana bread went into the oven, I sat at the table and opened a yellowed notebook I'd found in a drawer. My pen hovered for a moment, then I wrote, January 28th. The waves were rough this morning, but I made banana bread. That has to count for something. Noel's voice came back to me in pieces. I remembered him saying, "Don't let them shrink you." Back then, I thought he meant those retirement brochures Amelia kept sending, just in case, she said. But maybe he meant something else entirely. Maybe he knew more than he let on. While the bread cooled, I started exploring a little. In the hall closet, behind a dusty box of Christmas ornaments, I found a folder with my name on it. Inside were property deeds, bank statements, and little handwritten notes in Noel's familiar, looping script. Somehow, he had built an entire second life for me, a quiet, steady foundation hidden in paper and ink. I heard a sound outside and pulled back the curtain. There was an older man in a windbreaker standing at the edge of the yard. He had a leash in one hand, binoculars in the other. A black dog was sniffing around the hydrangeas. The man looked up and saw me. I waved, without thinking. He didn't wave back, just nodded once, then walked on. It didn't feel cruel, just distant, like I wasn't quite part of the picture yet. I turned back inside and opened a drawer near the front door, hoping to find batteries. Instead, I found a local library card. My name was typed on the front. It had been issued 6 months before Noel passed, still active. I didn't remember signing up for it. But it was mine, like the skillet, like the jazz, like the smell of cinnamon in the air. He had imagined a life for me, one that didn't depend on anyone else, a life where I could be more than somebody's mother, more than someone's burden. I didn't know yet what that life would look like, but in that moment, I wanted to find out. If you've ever stood in a quiet house and wondered what comes next, if you've ever asked yourself what's left when all the noise fades, then maybe you know a little of what I'm feeling right now. Tell me, have you ever had to start over in a place you didn't choose, with nothing but a skillet, a memory, and your name on a library card? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if this one feels like something you'd want to walk beside, you're welcome to subscribe. There's more I'm beginning to remember. Small things Noel left behind, pieces of me I thought I'd lost. And something tells me not everything in this house is what it seems. It was supposed to be a quick trip, just milk, maybe some tea bags if I could find the good kind. But when I turned off 3rd Street and saw this little cafe with a fern in the window and a chalkboard menu outside, I stopped. I hadn't been anywhere with booths and music in weeks. I wasn't even sure if I belonged in places like that anymore. The bell above the door gave a soft jingle as I stepped in. Warm air met me like an old scarf I didn't know I missed. The place smelled like espresso and something citrusy. In the back, a man was sketching seagulls with charcoal, his hands smudged. Behind the counter, someone was humming. Then I saw her. She could have been Amelia. Same jawline, same way her hair slipped behind one ear. But this girl, she smiled, wide and warm, like she meant it. "Hi there," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "Take your time." I nodded, already feeling a little flustered. "Just tea," I said, then added, "Earl Grey, if you have it." "Good choice. Want a slice of orange loaf? It's on the house. You look like you've been fighting the wind all morning." I smiled, couldn't help it. "Is it that obvious?" She laughed, only a little. Her name was Becca. We chatted while she poured my tea into a big ceramic mug. She mentioned the fog might clear later. I told her the gulls had been shrieking like they owned the world that morning. When she handed me the plate with the orange loaf, I didn't even reach for my wallet. I just said thank you, and I meant it. I picked a booth near the window and eased myself into it. The cushion let out a soft sigh. The glass was fogged around the edges, but I could still see the boardwalk and the ocean past it. I watched Becca talk to someone else, her hands moving with whatever story she was telling. Behind her, the music shifted to soft folk guitar. A breeze moved through the space, gentle like a breath. Then I saw my reflection in the window. Not my face, my posture. I was sitting straighter, my shoulders were down, my chin lifted, and I couldn't quite remember when that had happened. When Amelia worked at a bakery back in high school, she used to come home smelling like sugar and rebellion. Her apron was always crooked, her pockets full of crumpled bills and candy wrappers. I used to think that meant she was figuring out who she was. Maybe I was too. Becca passed by my table with a tray and called over her shoulder. "We're open late Thursdays if you ever want to stop by. Book club's at 7. We don't always talk about the book, though." I nodded, but I didn't say yes. Not yet. I didn't have a plan, just a travel mug filled with lavender tea and the scarf I got from Christmas 3 years ago. It still smelled faintly like old cologne and something else I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was courage. All day Thursday, I kept glancing at the clock. 4:12, then 5:46. I told myself I was only checking the weather. But right at 6:30, I zipped up my coat, slipped the mug into my bag, and stepped outside. The cafe's windows glowed warm, like honey, spilling light onto a quiet street. Inside, the usual tables had been pushed aside. In their place was a loose circle of mismatched chairs. Paper lanterns swayed gently above, and books were stacked along the windowsills, half open like conversations paused mid-sentence. I hovered at the entrance until Becca saw me. "Hey," she said with a soft smile, "you made it." I nodded and took a seat near the back, my hands wrapped around the warm mug. No one stared. No one asked questions. It felt like stepping into a room that had already made space for you, even if you weren't sure why. The book tonight was about a woman who lost everything, her husband, her home, and ended up living in a camper van. A few people laughed at parts of it, others sat quietly, nodding. Then someone asked what it really means to start over when you didn't choose to. I surprised myself by speaking. "It's strange," I said, almost to myself, "how quickly a place can stop feeling like it was ever yours. But sometimes the absence makes space for something else, even if you don't know what that is yet." The room went still for a second. Then a few people nodded. One woman placed her hand on her heart. No one interrupted. I thought about a time Noel took me to a bookstore event, back when Amelia was still young enough to draw pictures in the margins of restaurant menus. We sat in the back, sipping tea from mismatched mugs. He leaned over and whispered, "One day you'll have your own stories to tell." I'd rolled my eyes at the time, but now here I was. Becca came by with a tray of banana bread. She placed a slice on my napkin and said, "Next time, bring yours." I laughed, not politely. It was the kind of laugh that starts deep, somewhere behind your ribs. It was a sound I hadn't made in months. The group kept chatting. They talked about plot holes and poems and favorite quotes. One man read a line about salt air and memory. A retired art teacher said the ending felt too neat. A teenager with blue streaks in her hair read a haiku she'd written on the back of her bus pass. As the evening came to a close, a woman with silver curls leaned over and said, "A few of us go hiking next Saturday. Nothing crazy, just a coastal path. You're welcome to come along." I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I walked home under the stars. The mug was still warm in my bag, the scarf tucked gently around my chin. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was floating through someone else's life. I felt weightless, and maybe, just maybe, welcome. It had been almost 2 months, not a word, not even a text. I started measuring her silence by how many loads of laundry I did, or how many times I went to the store. Then, one quiet Tuesday morning, the phone rang. I was washing a chipped teacup, one Noel had picked up on our honeymoon in Cannon Beach. The gulls were loud outside, swooping low over the cliffs, and I almost didn't hear it. She said, "Mother." Not mom, not mama, like when she used to scrape her knee and ask for a ladybug band-aid. Just mother, like I was a file she'd pulled out to review. I leaned against the counter, still holding the wet cup. Her voice was pleasant, like small talk at a funeral. "How are you?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said. The lie came out easy now. She asked about the weather, about the coast, whether I still liked lavender tea. I let her talk, let the silences stretch out. She didn't ask where I was living, didn't bring up what she said that night in the kitchen when she told me to pack my bags. Eventually, she mentioned the house, said there were some complications with probate. A few forms hadn't been processed yet. Her voice changed, just slightly, like she was circling something she didn't want to say directly. "You wouldn't happen to have any of Dad's accounts or any paperwork you took with you?" That's when I knew. This wasn't about checking in. This was a fishing trip. I told her I'd think about it, that I'd look through my things. She said maybe when I was ready, we could talk properly. Then the line went quiet. She was gone. I stared at the phone, still glowing on the counter. The gulls had moved on. The kitchen smelled like soap and banana peel. I pressed my fingers into the edge of the sink. The metal felt cold, solid, real. I thought about her graduation, how she sobbed into my arms, afraid to leave for college. Back then, I was her safe place. Now, she sounded like someone reading a script she barely believed in. That afternoon, Lorna stopped by with lemon scones and caught me staring at the phone. "She called?" Lorna blinked. "After everything?" I nodded. What did she want? "Leverage," I said, wrapped up like conversation. Lorna gave a dry little laugh. "Well, at least she's consistent." We sat in the living room for a while, with soft music playing in the background. I didn't cry. I didn't explain. I just whispered, more to myself than to anyone, I don't owe her that anymore. It wasn't anger. It didn't feel like the end. It felt like release, like finally letting go of a thread I'd been holding on to too tightly for too long. Still, after Lorna left, I didn't move the phone. I left it sitting right there on the table, just in case she called back. The wind had picked up since morning. It tugged gently at my coat as I stepped onto the path behind the house. Noel used to call it the thinking trail. It wasn't much, just a stretch of packed dirt and wild grass, but it curled along the cliffs like a line drawn by hand. It never asked anything of you, it just let you walk. After Amelia's call, my legs needed somewhere to go. My hands didn't know what to hold, so I picked up my journal and let my feet carry me. You don't just wake up one morning and become someone new. It happens slowly, in quiet moments when no one's looking, when you decide not to call back, when you step outside wearing the scarf you used to save for special days and realize today is one of them. The salt air felt heavier than usual, thick with spring. Below, the ocean kept crashing and sighing like it had lived through too much. I found a flat rock and sat down, facing the water. Then I opened my journal. James had sent over a simple will template weeks ago. It had been sitting in the folder next to the Newport deed. I hadn't touched it, not until now. But today, I filled it out. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity. I wrote my full name carefully, Karen Louise Whitmore. Under emergency contact, I put down Becca, not because she's family, but because she saw me, really saw me, and never asked me to be smaller than I am. The sun dipped lower behind the clouds, throwing silver across the waves. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out Christmas's old tobacco tin. It still held the scent of cedar and pepper. Inside were 3 pieces of sea glass I'd found this week. 1 pale green, 1 cloudy white, 1 deep blue. I added a new one, amber, smooth, soft around the edges. Then I closed the lid. And something inside me eased. I pulled out Noel's letter from the pocket of my journal. I've read it more times than I can count. But today, 1 line held me still. There's no map for how to forgive them. Just promise me you won't shrink to fit back into their world. He had seen it coming, the shift, that quiet moment when the people you love stop seeing you as whole. I folded the letter and tucked it away. And then I whispered something I hadn't said out loud until now. I'm not going back, ever. The wind picked up my voice and carried it past the cliffs, out over the water. And somehow, saying it made the air feel warmer. If you've ever stood at the edge of something new, quietly scared, quietly hopeful, then you already understand more of me than you might think. I'm glad you're here. I'd love to know if there's been a moment in your life when saying something out loud made it feel real. You can share it in the comments if you want. And if there's been a shift stirring in your own story, I hope you'll keep following mine. You can subscribe if you haven't yet. I have a feeling what comes next might surprise us both. The daffodils came back first. One morning in late April, I looked up from my tea, and there they were, bright little bursts swaying just outside the window, like they were saying, "You're still here. You made it through." I stood there, just watching them tremble in the soft rain, when my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from James Holloway. His voice was calm, steady, never in a hurry. He said he had an update about the trust. Nothing urgent, he added, but he believed I'd want to know. I sat down on the couch. Noel's old cardigan was still draped over the arm like it had always been. I pressed play again, and the second time I caught it. He said Amelia's name, and the word dispute. But it didn't rattle me, not anymore. Later that day, we set up a video call. The light outside had faded into that soft, gray-blue Newport is known for. That in-between light where the sky can't quite decide whether to rain or rest. I lit a candle on the coffee table, more out of habit than anything. It smelled like vanilla and vetiver, something warm, something clean. James showed up on the screen in a charcoal blazer, his glasses catching a bit of light. He started gently. "Karen, Amelia has formally challenged one portion of the estate. She's claiming there was a misunderstanding about your husband's intent with the Newport property." I nodded. She always was good at rewriting things. He gave a small smile, but didn't say anything back. Then he told me the trust was airtight. that Noel had gone out of his way to make sure I'd be protected, emotionally, legally, in every way that mattered. He said I didn't have to respond directly, but he'd send over the documents in case I wanted to see them. I looked at the little windows on the screen, contracts, emails, legal summaries, all neatly labeled, all part of a mess that wasn't mine. I said, I don't think I need to read any of that, James.
"You're absolutely entitled to ignore it," he said, kind as ever. "But for closure, you might want to sign the final confirmation online, just a formality to block any future filings." I hovered my cursor for a second. Then I clicked. The box turned green. And just like that, it was done. I leaned back. The house was quiet, except for the soft piano music coming through the speaker, one of Noel's favorites. He used to play it on Sunday mornings when we'd pretend to read the newspaper, but mostly just sipped our coffee and listened to the birds. James cleared his throat gently. "If anything else comes up, I'll let you know, but I have a feeling that was her last attempt." I didn't cry, I said, mostly to myself. He paused, then replied warmly, "You don't have to explain." But I wasn't explaining. I was just noticing. I didn't cry, not this time. I closed the laptop, stood up slowly, and poured myself another cup of tea. Then I walked to the window. The daffodils were still dancing out there in the rain. I whispered a quiet thank you, though I wasn't sure who I meant. Maybe Noel, maybe the woman I was becoming. The porch light was never really about lighting up the yard. That night, I flipped the switch, not so someone could find their way to me, but so I could see where I was. The amber glow spilled onto the steps like honey, warming the old wood beneath my feet. It wasn't bright enough to light the whole yard, but that wasn't the point. I wasn't trying to light up the world. I just wanted to claim a small piece of it. The banana bread was cooling on the counter, already sliced into neat little squares. I'd wrapped half of it in foil, just like Noel used to do when he brought a loaf to the community center. I tucked it into a little wicker basket lined with an old faded dish towel. It was time. I crossed the street slowly. The potluck had already started. Laughter floated up between the trees. Someone was tuning a guitar on the back porch. Strings of warm yellow bulbs crisscrossed above the yard, blending with the porch lights and the first stars starting to show in the sky. Becca saw me first. "Karen," she called out, "you're late, and I hope you brought the good stuff." I held up the basket, smiling. "Still warm," I said. "Don't make me regret it." There were maybe a dozen neighbors out there. Some I recognized from the cafe, a few from the trail. No name tags, no big introductions, just chairs, blankets, baked beans, and kids chasing fireflies across the grass. I found an empty seat by the fire pit and passed the basket around. Someone with silver hair and kind laugh lines asked where the recipe came from.
"It was Noel's favorite," I said quietly, smoothing the edge of my sleeve. "He used to say it tasted like Sundays and patience." Nobody shifted awkwardly. Nobody offered a sad smile or a quick change of subject. They just listened. One woman passed me a plate of corn salad. Another raised her glass to mine without saying anything, and that was enough. Later, Becca leaned over and asked, "Would you ever think about giving a little talk at the library? Something about starting over, second acts and all that?" I laughed. "That sounds dangerously close to public speaking." She grinned. "Just think about it." As the evening stretched on, someone started playing old folk songs on the guitar. A breeze came in off the ocean, cool and clean. I pulled Noel's flannel a little tighter around my shoulders, not out of sadness anymore, just out of habit. That shirt had carried me through a lot. When I got home, I left the porch light on. Then I opened the window and let the ocean air in. It curled into the room like an old friend. I slid into bed, resting one hand on the soft edge of a pillow I'd stitched together years ago. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I slept. Not like I was hiding. Not like I was waiting for someone to knock on the door, but fully, quietly, without dreams of anything closing. My name is Karen Walker. I'm 71, and I stayed. It's Mother's Day. The breeze smells like rosemary and fresh-cut grass. Somewhere down the road, I can hear wind chimes catching the light. I'm sitting out back with a cup of coffee, still wrapped in Noel's old cardigan, just watching the garden wake up. This morning, a little finch started building a nest in the crook of the porch beam, and I didn't chase her off. I used to think closure meant silence, that if you waited long enough, the pain would settle, that maybe one day someone would show up and say, "You were right," and somehow everything would come undone and make sense again. But that's not how it works. Sometimes closure is just the sound of your own breath, uninterrupted. It's sitting still without needing to explain or defend or brace for the next blow. I open my journal, not the leather one Noel gave me back in '98. This is a new one. Soft blue cover, spiral spine, already a little warped from sea salt and tea. And at the top of the page, I write, "This is not for them. It's for me." Then I make a list of what I'm grateful for. The porch light, the ocean path, my own 2 hands, banana bread that never lets me down, a name I didn't change even when it hurt to carry, a life that still tastes like something warm.
Last week, I mailed Emma a birthday card. Just a simple one, with a puppy on the front and glitter that kept sticking to my countertop. I didn't put money in it. I didn't ask Amelia if it was okay. I just wrote, "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I hope someone sings to you today." I always did, because love doesn't wait for permission. I press a small sprig of lavender into the fold of the journal. The petals leave behind the faintest trace of purple when I close the page. Next to me is a folder James sent. It's about writing workshops at the library. I've been working on a short story. It's not about Noel, not about Amelia either. It's about a woman who forgets how to be small, who finds her voice again in quiet places, one ordinary morning at a time. I close the journal and say it out loud. I stayed, not as a survivor, not as someone nursing old wounds, but as the one who gets to write the ending, as someone who was told to leave and chose not to, someone who realized that healing doesn't come from going back or being invited in. It comes from standing still long enough to notice you were never the one who needed to move. I don't know who I'll become next. Maybe a writer. Maybe just a neighbor who always remembers your name. Maybe a woman who walks every morning and waves at the passing cars. But for the first time in years, I'm curious. And I've learned that curiosity is its own kind of beginning. Some things arrive without fanfare, like peace, or the moment you realize you don't need to prove your worth to anyone who chose to forget it. Sitting in my garden that morning, with the breeze turning the edges of my journal, I knew I hadn't just survived. I had truly stayed. We raise our children with everything we've got, our time, our love, our memories, and sometimes they grow into people we no longer recognize. But that doesn't mean we stop being who we are. Forgiveness isn't always something we give to others. Sometimes it's what we give ourselves, so we can begin again. If any part of this story feels like yours, I'd be honored to hear it in the comments. And if you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe. This quiet little corner of storytelling is always open to you. And if you've ever felt dismissed or invisible, stay with me. Because next, I want to tell you what happened when my son laughed at my $800 pension and said, "Work or get out." You might want to hear that one too.